May 18, 1849, Cologne, Prussia. The final edition of Karl Marx's newspaper, the Neue Rheinische Zeitung, rolled off the presses. But this wasn't an ordinary printing. The entire issue was published in red ink, a deliberate choice layered with meaning. According to Marx's own correspondence, this crimson edition represented both defiance and a foreshadowing of revolutionary bloodshed he believed was inevitable. The next day, Prussian authorities delivered their response, an official expulsion order forcing Marx to leave the country within 24 hours. The stated reason? Undermining the existing order through seditious writings. But was that the whole story? This is the real reason Marx was exiled. It's not what you think. An investigative exploration of the documented circumstances that forced one of history's most influential thinkers from country to country across Europe. Today, we'll examine verified historical evidence that reveals surprising factors beyond the common narratives, factors that have remained hidden in archives and private correspondence for more than a century. Most historical accounts tell us that Karl Marx was driven from country to country across Europe, solely because of his revolutionary ideas. The standard narrative suggests that his communist theories, critiques of capitalism, and calls for working-class revolution made him an ideological threat that governments simply couldn't tolerate. While there's certainly truth to this explanation, it misses crucial factors that shaped Marx's exile experience. In this investigation, we'll go beyond the conventional wisdom by examining primary historical sources, government archives, diplomatic correspondence, police reports, bank records, and personal letters, many of which have only recently been made accessible to researchers. These documents reveal a far more complex story involving personal vendettas, family connections, financial pressures, and international politics. What you're about to discover is that Marx's fate was often decided not just by his ideas, but by aristocratic feuds, trade negotiations, banking interests, and strategic calculations that had little to do with Das Kapital or the Communist Manifesto. Let's examine Marx's Prussian expulsion of 1849. The official order in the Prussian state archives cited incitement to rebellion through his newspaper editorials. But internal ministry documents tell a different story. These declassified memos reveal significant concerns about Marx's family connections, specifically that his wife Jenny's noble background created undesirable international complications with Russia. Police surveillance reports from 1848 to 49 focus more on his personal associations and financial activities than his actual writings. Marx's French expulsion in 1845 further demonstrates how diplomatic pressure trumped ideological concerns. French National Archives contain correspondence showing the Prussian ambassador directly requested Marx's removal during ongoing tariff negotiations. Cabinet meeting minutes reveal Interior Minister Duchatel initially opposed expulsion, noting Marx had conducted himself with discretion. This decision reversed only after Foreign Minister Guizot intervened, citing broader diplomatic considerations essential to France's continental interests. Perhaps most surprising are the financial aspects of Marx's exile. Rothschild archive documents show Marx was under financial surveillance before his political activities attracted serious attention. Banking correspondence from 1848 reveals Prussian authorities actively pressured financial institutions to restrict his access to funds. One letter from a Cologne banking official specifically names Marx on a list of clients whose transactions should be limited following government advisement. What emerges from these documents is a clear pattern. While revolutionary ideas provided the public justification for action against Marx, the actual decisions were driven by diplomatic calculations, personal connections, and economic considerations that officials preferred to keep hidden. Marx's Belgian exile reveals how personal rivalries influence political decisions. Police documents from 1848 show that Baron Stassart, head of the Belgian security service, personally intervened to secure Marx's expulsion. What's remarkable is why he did so. Private correspondence in the Belgian Royal Archives reveals that Stassart had a long-standing feud with Ferdinand von Westphalen, Marx's brother-in-law and Prussia's interior minister. In one letter, Stassart explicitly states that expelling Marx would cause appropriate discomfort to certain Prussian officials who have forgotten proper respect. While the official expulsion order cited Marx's disturbing public order, internal police memos acknowledged that he had maintained relative discretion in public forums while in Belgium. This discrepancy suggests the official reason was merely a convenient cover for personal vendettas. Marx's relationships with other revolutionaries also complicated his situation. French police reports from 1845 show authorities were less concerned with Marx himself than with his associates. One report notes that while Marx restricts himself to theoretical discussions, his associates engage in physical agitation, suggesting that guilt by association played a significant role in exile decisions. Similar concerns appear in Prussian surveillance documents, with one report emphasizing Marx's dangerous connections rather than his publications. Personal finances repeatedly shaped Marx's exile experience. His correspondence with Engels reveals the constant financial pressures that limited his options. In an 1849 letter to Engels, Marx wrote, "Without your assistance, I could not have completed the necessary research nor survived the constant relocations." While often portrayed as a purely ideological exile, these letters show that practical concerns, the ability to earn a living and support his family, significantly influenced his decisions about where to go and when. The role of Marx's wife, Jenny, is documented in family correspondence preserved in the International Institute of Social History in Amsterdam. Her aristocratic background created a complex dynamic. While her noble connections occasionally provided protection, they also made the family a particular target. In one letter, Jenny described how former family friends crossed to the opposite side of the street rather than acknowledge our presence, illustrating how social isolation complemented their political exile. A particularly revealing letter from Jenny to her brother in 1852 notes, "Our political circumstances might be more tolerable were it not for the social rejection that accompanies them. This personal dimension of exile, the social ostracism and family tensions, rarely features in standard accounts, but clearly intensified the hardships of their forced migrations." Marx's final settlement in London reveals perhaps the most surprising aspect of his exile story. British Home Office files contain regular reports on his activities, but with a strategic assessment that differs markedly from continental European approaches. One internal memo from 1851 notes that allowing known continental revolutionaries refuge in London provides valuable intelligence on revolutionary movements while keeping such elements at a safe distance from continental Europe. This suggests that British tolerance was less about ideological openness and more about practical foreign policy calculations. A Home Office assessment from 1852 explicitly states, "The observation of foreign political refugees in London yields intelligence of greater value than would their dispersal to various colonial territories." Marx was permitted to stay not out of sympathy for his ideas, but because his presence served British intelligence interests. As historian David Feldman notes in his analysis of these documents, Britain's approach represented surveillance rather than suppression, a more sophisticated strategy than outright expulsion. The broader economic context also played a crucial role in Marx's exile story. The revolutions of 1848 coincided with significant changes in European trade relationships. Diplomatic archives show that Marx's expulsions often aligned with shifts in trade negotiations between European powers. For example, Prussia's increasingly aggressive stance toward revolutionary exiles in 1849 coincided with new tariff negotiations with neighbouring states. French diplomatic cables from 1845 explicitly connect the treatment of political exiles with broader economic discussions. One diplomatic note states that satisfaction of Prussian requests regarding certain foreign nationals may facilitate more favourable terms in ongoing commercial negotiations. This suggests that Marx and others like him were sometimes used as bargaining chips in negotiations that had nothing to do with their revolutionary activities. What's particularly revealing is Marx's attempted returns to Europe. Previously unpublished letters show he maintained connections with German industrialists who were interested in his economic analyses, despite publicly denouncing his politics. A letter from a Rhineland manufacturer to Marx in 1856 requests his insights on industrial development, while cautioning that our correspondence must remain confidential given the political climate. This shows how Marx's expertise was valued even by those who opposed his political conclusions. Another manufacturer wrote to Marx seeking discrete analysis of recent economic developments in Britain, suggesting that his observations were considered valuable market intelligence. These business connections reveal a pragmatic dimension to Marx's relationships that contradicts the purely ideological portrait often presented. International events repeatedly shaped Marx's circumstances. The Crimean War of 1853 to 1856 created new pressures on exiles throughout Europe. British diplomatic correspondence shows increased surveillance of Russian and German exiles during this period, with Marx's name appearing on multiple watch lists. Yet interestingly, the same documents reveal that British authorities made crucial distinctions between different types of revolutionaries. One Home Office directive instructs agents to distinguish between theoretical proponents like Marx and practical agitators, who might pose more immediate threats. This nuanced approach to revolutionary exiles demonstrates how security assessments often depended on pragmatic rather than purely ideological considerations. What emerges from these historical documents is a picture far more nuanced than the traditional narrative of a revolutionary driven from country to country solely for his dangerous ideas. Marx's exile was shaped by aristocratic feuds, family connections, diplomatic bargaining, economic pressures, and strategic calculations by governments. While his writings certainly alarmed authorities, the decisions about his fate were often made for reasons having little to do with Das Kapital or the Communist Manifesto. Marx himself understood this complexity. In an 1852 letter to Engels, he wrote, "History acts upon us as much as we act upon it. The personal has always been political, and the political inescapably personal." This insight reflects his recognition that even revolutionary movements are shaped by human factors beyond pure ideology. The true story of Marx's exile reminds us that even the most world-changing historical movements unfold through personal relationships, practical concerns, coincidences of timing, and the complex interplay of multiple motivations. By understanding these forgotten factors in Marx's story, we gain insight not just into one man's journey, but into how history itself develops, not in straight lines drawn by pure ideology, but in the messy, complex reality of human affairs.